Hi, welcome back to The Historic Nerd. Today's episode we're going to talk about the F-22 Interceptor game for Sega Genesis. What makes the game rather unique is its release date. In 1991, when the game was released, the F-22 wouldn't actually come into service until 2005, a full 14 years apart.
I know firsthand from flying the Raptor against other aircraft and flying other aircraft against the Raptor that it's like clubbing baby seal.
Interesting fact about the F-22 fighter is that it's actually been in development since 1981, meaning that this fighter has been on the drawing board and in development longer than many of us have been alive, at least longer than I've been alive. But what that means is actually the fighter itself has been in popular culture for at least 2 decades, and F-22 Interceptor actually marks its first appearance on that stage. Again, what is also interesting about the release date of 1991 is that is the same year that the F-22 actually won the competition against the YF-23 to become the Air Force's main air superiority fighter. Which means the game F-22 Interceptor could have very easily have been F-23 Interceptor. The game was published by EA and remarkably was made by basically one man, Edward Lerner, who did basically the entire job by himself under his own company, Lerner Research. The game was released fourth quarter of 1991, making that rather interesting considering the F-22 actually wasn't selected to be the main air superiority fighter for the United States until April of that year, giving them maybe 6-7 months to program the game before it had to be released. F-22 Interceptor's plane is actually based off the rough design of the YF-22 prototype that was in direct competition with the YF-23. But an interesting fact about the YF-23 is that it was arguably a superior aircraft in the sense that it had a lower radar profile and also a higher potential top speed. The YF-23 lost, however, because the F-22 was more agile and also further along its production schedule, making it considerably cheaper to push forward at around $150 million per unit, where the F-23 was considerably higher because it was a more complex design. The game itself isn't that bad. For a flight sim, it's actually one of the better ones released on the Sega Genesis. The nice thing about it is it has a wide range of missions and also gives you the ability to change your weapon loadout for different operational demands. The game got a few things right about the S-22. Basically, it got the profile of the aircraft correct, but this is going to sound like nitpicking, but there are some other things that the game got incorrect about the weapon systems of the aircraft.
What's your problem, Smith? Not elegant enough for you?
The game has the F-22 basically armed with 2 autocannons. What's really interesting about that is that the F-22 now only has 1, and there was actually quite a bit of debate that went into that 1 cannon being there.
You can't hurt anybody with that pansy-ass gun. Add on some firepower.
Because the Air Force actually, at least the Air Corps of both the Navy and Air Force, had actually gone into a debate about whether or not aircraft actually needed these guns in the first place, because they thought that air-to-air combat wouldn't be fought with those anymore, it would be fought with radar-guided missiles, heat seekers, sidewinders. And they actually paid for this mistake because they took that to heart during the Vietnam conflict when they released the F-4 Phantom. And the aircraft actually performed quite well with its missiles, but once it ran out of that complement, it was actually basically vulnerable. So the US military actually had to develop gun pods that they would mount to the bottom of the F-4 Phantom. So that was an entire mistake they could have avoided. So the F-22, living in that legacy, was still armed with a gun, even though it can't get anywhere near any other aircraft to use it because it unfortunately lacks in close-in situations. The F-22 was never meant to be a multi-role fighter. It was never meant to engage targets on the ground. It was basically solely meant to maintain air superiority, engage other aircraft. So essentially in close-in scenarios the aircraft doesn't perform as well as because it's designed to engage targets outside of visual range, using its stealth as its advantage.
Could not find him no matter what I did, and the next time was when he flew directly over the top of my airplane. I saw him visually.
Because essentially the program, at an extreme cost of $66 billion, has unfortunately kind of run its course. The F-22 was originally designed to challenge other air superiority fighters of the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union no longer exists, and most other countries on the planet lack the financial wherewithal to put up programs to challenge it. So essentially in recent years it's become a little irrelevant.
14 million.
Yeah.
What did you say, General?
Billion.
The F-22, in similar fashion to the Bradley fighting vehicle, was actually a rather kind of overblown expenditure. Basically, the reason why the plane was so successful in drawing government funds to make it last as long as it did was because during the fabricating process of an F-22 would order parts from every state in the Union. So when a congressman would want to actually X the plane off the military spending budget, he would be risking jobs in his own state. So basically the political position of being against the F-22 was almost untenable for most congressmen. The F-22 in 2011 was removed from production because of a number of problems that are almost too numerous to mention in this video. But one thing can be said about the F-22 is that it had fantastic PR, and the reason why the program did as well as it did is because it became almost intertwined with American military culture. You couldn't even go to a film in the last 7 years without seeing that plane. The F-22 will be remembered for its failures and its victories, and F-22 Interceptor is just kind of a footnote in that history.